Hello and welcome to InFocus on quewsnews with me, CurtisHinton. What a week it's been for UK politics. We've had factories closing, Conservatives moving over to reform again. We've got the assisted dying bill that passed through and immigration figures changing, down, up, who knows? Joining me to discuss all these topics today, I've got US and UK agricultural politics and policies advisor. Would you call yourself advisor Andrew Henderson? Welcome to the programme. You're a UK and UK politics agricultural focus. That's where you are at.
I am, only because I've self-invented myself through a TV show we did in North Dakota called Across the Pond, where I would share the things that were happening here in UK agricultural policy and compare them with the parallel things that were happening in America over the last 5 years. So prior to the previous Trump administration handing over to the Biden administration, and then all the way through the last 4 years. And I'll just add this, Chris, while I'm on. We all knew it was going to be a landslide win well before the election day. Everybody knew that if they knew anything about the truth in America.
And a lot of Americans that we've spoken to on the programme have said that. They've said that the media was put in the narrative of that. It was so close, but people on the ground kind of was expecting a Trump victory.
Yeah, and look, I think we're now at 78 million votes for Trump and 73 so-called votes for Kamala. I just want to say this. They're still counting Democrat votes for the last 20 days. And it's really quite true, if you look into the depths of this, that there's an awful lot of court cases about to begin about where those votes have been found. And I would add to that and say, look, when you see that the only states that the Democrats won in were those states where you didn't need an ID to vote.
Yeah, that's a big thing in America at the moment, isn't it? The voter ID, the Republicans are calling for it, especially Trump was calling for it.
I know states where the people could have voted 14 or 15 times each.
Well, Andrew, we are here to talk about UK politics. I know it's going to cross over and you'll find yourself crossing over. This week, Stellantis announced the closure of the Vauxhall plant in Luton. 120 years almost it's been there for. Over 1,100 people's jobs are at risk. What's going on? Is this a climate change issue, or is it just a business not wanting to invest in the UK?
I think it's a bit of both. I think people I talk to that are in our industry when it comes to transport, I think that certainly in logistics, electric transport is nowhere near where it needs to be in order to produce efficiencies required to run a just-in-time delivery service. Secondly, I don't think the general public are anywhere near that. And, you know, the idea of mining a very, very important mineral in Africa, transporting it to China, making it into a battery, and then transporting that battery to Japan or France, and telling the rest of the world, and UK, telling the rest of the world that we're saving the planet by doing it, people have really got the message here. And I don't think I think people realise that even the electricity you plug into has to have come from somewhere. And if you look at the figures, most of the electricity in the UK, 96.5% of it is gas or fossil fuel right now.
Well, the UK, by the way, they want the businesses to be net zero by 2030. And Stellantis have come out and said that this move is partly driven, they've said, by the UK zero emission mandate, which imposes annual quotas for electric vehicles. And if they don't comply, £15,000 per vehicle will be given as a fee to them. That's astonishing, isn't it, the fee?
It's astonishing, and it's going to be our money if we ever open our pockets to it. Let's look, 1992, the world's percentage of fuel that was fossil fuel, or oil, as we call it, and gas was 77.5%. By 2023, it's 76.5%. But this is the thing. Fossil fuel consumption in that period is up by 67%. We've barely touched the needle. So the idea that in the next 4, 5, 6 years, we can, as the UK, become the only country in the world that's reliant on wind and solar power with some nuclear support it's smiling in the wind, frankly.
Is
I mean,
it
it really
Miliband
is
with a
ridiculous.
fetish? Is that what it is? He's got a weird little fetish for this net zero by 20, because no other country is promising this by 2030. We are the only one.
Those really good long-term, I saw some of the interviews with those workers at Vauxhall in Luton. Some of them have been there 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
The motor industry in the UK has the potential to flourish if the right investment goes in, because, as you well know, emissions from both petrol and diesel cars have come down dramatically. Yes, there's a good argument for a balanced approach, an electric stroke, a hybrid approach, but a pure electric car. How many people really believe that we can all have pure electric cars and the grid can take it? That's the really hilarious part of all this. And China, I don't think they can supply us with the goods anyway. Their emissions are now on carbon dioxide. Every year, they increase their emissions by more than we currently do in 1 year. Now, what you need to understand, or everybody listening to this needs to understand, that China's emissions now are 35% of the world's emissions on carbon. And if you want to put that into perspective, their emissions are higher than the whole of Europe, Japan, and the United States put together already. So we are moving our little problem to China,
To another world, to another country.
but for a price. We have electricity. I mean, Curtis, what do you think the price of a kilowatt hour of electricity is in Russia at the moment? They're at war with us, apparently, in Ukraine. Do you know what the kilowatt hour costs per?
What is it per hour?
It's 6 pence, equivalent to 6p. In America, the average is 12 pence. Pakistan and India, Pakistan are around 7 or 8 pence. And we're currently sitting at 28 to 32 pence. And somebody says that we are there to compete with the rest of Europe and the world for manufacturing and improving performance and production in the United Kingdom. We are for the wind. This policy is for the wind, and all it's going to do, this will be the first of hundreds of thousands of jobs that are going to be lost in manufacturing in the United Kingdom.
Well,
and
the Society of the Motor Manufacturers and Traders estimates ZEV mandate will cost car makers around about 6 billion this year alone and impact business viability and people's jobs. They are talking tens of thousands of jobs out potentially. A stat from the Vauxhall Luton branch specifically, opened in 1905. It reached its peak in 1960 and it employed 37,000 people then. And now we're looking at 1,100 jobs just over that are going to be potentially lost, or they have to move. I believe that potentially the northwest, they're offering them job opportunities. You know, Luton, just north of London, they can all pick up and relocate to the north of the country, or the government is expected to help, the local government is expected to help relocate them into new jobs in the area. Unemployment is up. It's getting worse as well. See, with AI coming in, there's a potential chance even more become unemployed. We are also exposing ourselves, based on what you were just saying, to another Russia situation in terms of if a war breaks out with China and somewhere else, and we're on the other side against China, prices are going to go up.
Well, if it's Russia, even more. And because our special relationship, and this is the area of my expertise, is hanging by a thread, and at this moment in time, you know, I know we're about to be offered a free trade deal with America, but I'm pretty sure that Keir Starmer is going to reject that.
Why?
But I know that's going to happen.
Why would he reject it?
Politically, he can't afford to allow it because it's going to include very cheap fuel. America is going to drill, baby, drill. Those are the words that the president has used. He has told his people that they have 500 years of gas and oil, at least, without exploration. By the way, those figures mirror very, very close to what we have left to extract from the North Sea, just so you know that. And the latest COP26, I think it was COP26 or COP20, that happened in Azerbaijan, I think it was. They've just invested in developing new oil fields with BP, the place where the climate conference was. You know, we're being played in every which way you look at it, really. And I'm looking at this, and I know that there's a huge support within America to work with the British on manufacturing and on agriculture. And actually, America would be the first to admit that they've not been playing by a lot of the rules in agriculture. And that's why RFK has been installed as the food and health czar, because he's going to take an awful lot of that processed food out of the equation. But that's real sustainability. When you try to make use of less pesticides, less fertilizer, encourage farmers to utilize their forage and also their manure more efficiently in order to create the food and the healthy animals of the future. That is what I would call sustainability, not a plastic piece of essential metal sitting on top of a farm. That isn't going to improve yours or my lifestyle in the future, Curtis, I can assure you.
We talk about manure. We are on the topic of climate change, with the electric vehicles. Arla, there's a big call for boycott for Arla. They are putting in bovar feeding additive to help suppress the methane in essentially cow's poo. As agricultural kind of expert on the program today, are you for or against this initially?
Totally against it. It's humbug. It's a joke. I can explain this very, very quickly to anybody listening. When you mow your lawn every year, and you have to do it, if you're very, very conscious about your lawn and you want to keep it looking beautiful, what you do is you keep mowing it. And what happens? What happens when you keep mowing the lawn? Tell me, Curtis, what happens if you keep mowing your lawn?
It doesn't grow?
No, it does grow.
Oh, it does grow. Oh, if you keep going. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
But because what happens is that a blade of grass, all it wants to do is reproduce. So it has to grow so that it can then produce some seed, and then the whole cycle of life begins. So if you have an animal that can feed off the nutrients that come from photosynthesis, which is capturing carbon dioxide, and you keep cutting it, and it grows, and you keep cutting it, or the animal keeps eating it, so it can never head. What you do is you increase the sequestration of carbon tenfold. In fact, a well-grazed platform, properly managed by a farmer, will sequester up to 5 times more carbon dioxide than an acre of Amazon rainforest. So let's just the solution to carbon sequestration is the livestock that can graze the fields that you and I can't grow a crop on that we can eat. Like somewhere in Cumbria, somewhere in the Highlands of Scotland, the lowlands and highlands of South and North and South Wales, those areas that you can't physically grow a crop on, that we can directly consume, that is the way to sequester carbon. And that's why, when I went to China, I went 5 times actually, Curtis. China is a very, very clever country when it comes to food safety. And what they do is they test all of the fresh produce that they consume for pollution. And I'm here to tell you that the lowest pollution in the whole of Europe when it came to dairy produce wasn't the UK. I wish it was. We were second. The lowest was Ireland. And guess what? Ireland has the most cows per acre of anywhere in Europe. So the idea that farting and belching is causing climate change and pollution is for the wind, literally.
They claim it's going to reduce emissions by 27%.
Yeah, cow emissions. But let's just break that down as well. It's the cycle of life. Once something breaks methane into the atmosphere. Methane isn't the same as the carbon that comes out of Ed Milli-billionaire Band's private jet. What happens with this particular methane is it takes 12 or 13 years to break down, and it goes right the way through the cycle. So what's happening when a cow farts, because the cow levels numbers of actually being sustained over the last 20 years. I've been in the industry 35 years from my sins, but what I'm going to say to you is that the cows' numbers and output have remained fairly static over the last 20 to 30 years. So the cow that farted 13 years ago, its methane has been dissolved, and another one's waiting. It's a cycle. It's the cycle of life, and it is just for the wind to actually believe anything that's coming out of Ed Miliband's mouth. It's stupid. What it is money laundering. It's offering big corporations 40% tax breaks to invest in solar panels or in wind farms or, frankly, in electric car batteries, and then allowing you, the taxpayer, to subsidize that and then charging you down the line extra for the electricity that it produces. That's the game plan. It's nothing else.
So what could this bovard do? What's it going to do potentially to us? Because obviously it goes into the cow. It could then get into the milk, into the meat. So could it have effects on humans? I think that's a big concern for people.
Well, one of the elements within it, the chemical symbol elements within it, the chain of amino acids in it, has been proven to have issues within rats and in cows on an extended experiment. The initial FDA experiment went over 90 days in America, and so saw no noticeable difference between the control, which is not using the drug, and using Bovar. Having said that, the Japanese have produced some extended data. Go and have a look. It's out there for people to see, that suggests that very soon after the 90-day period, there was increases in carcinogenic outbreak in the animals that were in the trial. But there are elements of this product which are toxic, and it's actually on the packaging, to humans. So anybody with any modicum of sense knows that if all of a sudden you started to consume an excess of something, you are liable to reap the rewards of what that excess is, of something that's toxic to humans. Now, Arla, which is the company that we're talking about, I have a lot of farmers who are fantastic farmers for Arla, who are really at the cutting edge of sustainability. And I would say this, it's not the farmers, Curtis, that are trying to market this. It's the people that have been employed into those processes that are trying to market this.
People, farmers, are they going to, I mean, it's a huge topic we could talk about farmers with, but that's for another day. But are farmers going to feel it in their pocket potentially?
Oh, very much so. I mean, this is the Bud Light moment for Arla if they're not careful. I mean, it really is. I mean, you start making the general public question the efficacy of a product, and they will vote with their feet. I mean, and at the end of the day, that's what I don't want to see that happen. Yeah. We're too early for that to happen. But the way that this is blown up on social media, the trouble is there is evidence out there that suggests that there certainly is no peer-reviewed evidence that long-term that this Bovar is safe. 10 years' time, maybe, but not now. And certainly trialing it with the general public in Morrison's and Tesco's and Marks and Spencer's is, if it does turn out to have the effects that could be a byproduct of this, then we're talking serious human harm and animal harm. Why? Why would we put ourselves through that over something that has zero to do with reducing the heat and climate change, in my opinion, because there's no proof that that methane is the issue here with carbon. grass sequestration of carbon is the solution. Therefore, cows are the solution, period.
To eat, to regrow, to eat, to regrow, and for it to, yeah.
Eat to regrow, and frankly, we are bovines. You know, we are omnivores. We eat vegetables and we eat meat. I know there's lobbies that will eat one or the other, but at the end of the day, we're built to eat both and in moderation. And our bodies are built to take some of these nutrients in that form. We have not developed to be purely vegetarian or vegan yet.
One thing I will say is Arla has come out and said that the claims for this boycott are based on misinformation. They haven't gone on to say what was the misinformation. They haven't gone on to elaborate more, in my opinion, to defend themselves. So at the moment, there's no reason to believe that what is being said is wrong, because you could just say that there's no evidence to back that up. So I think until there is evidence, I think people will start to boycott Arla, and that's Lurpak as well, which is quite a big, popular.
I would go as far as to say there's no concrete evidence either way. What I think is important in this particular issue is that the reason they're doing it has no relevance whatsoever. That's the key. The key to this is that it doesn't matter whether they're even right that it's reducing methane output from a cow. That's irrelevant. The fact is that it's not required in order to secure the future of our planet whatsoever. Yeah. It's gaslighting, literally.
It's almost covering up.
It's the ultimate gaslight.
It's like covering up a big. It's making what would be a small issue being the main issue to cover up the bigger issues that are at play here. There are bigger issues, as we say, with China, with their electric vehicles, for example. Yes, your vehicle might not cause as many emissions if it's electric, but the production of it probably does. And shipping
Curtis,
over.
If I have to ask you this question, and any sane person that's watching this, if Ed Miliband and Arla really believed any of this, why would he fly to all these conferences all over the world about climate change, whilst you and I are sat here debating it on Zoom?
Yeah, it's very true. It's just, very true.
You know, think about it. He could avoid every single bit of all that pollution that he's responsible. And I believe that over 300 Labour-associated staff went to the last climate conference. Think of the carbon footprint of that. And anybody that votes for that is basically voting for the king's new clothes. He's got nothing on underneath.
Well,
you're laughing, but he hasn't.
we can talk about this, especially with your knowledge, for hours. But I do want to move on to the big historic bill that was put through yesterday in its second reading, the assisted dying bill for adults, terminally ill adults, passed through Parliament 330 to 275. What's your initial thoughts on this?
It's a very difficult one. I've just had my mother just passed away very recently from dementia.
Our condolences for that. It's must be a tough time.
It was, and I'm also going to admit something. It really did upset me that she wasn't actually able to convey properly how she felt. I know in my heart that my mother wouldn't want to have gone through what she went through.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can talk about this really from a point of view as a son watching my mother die. And I know my sister felt the same way. Now, it's a really difficult question, this, because I'm only comfortable with this if more than, I'm going to say, 3 people are involved in making that decision that have no interest financially or knowledge of the person that decision is being made with.
So, just to pause you there, so 2 doctors and a judge. Is that the 3 independent people that you are referring to in that? Would that be enough for you?
I would like to think, I would like to think that those 3 people, if that's the, I'm going to say it's there to be abused. That's the problem. So there has to be a very, very strict way of implementing this. I would suggest that the judges and the doctors aren't allowed to have any contact between each other. That's the first thing I think would be really important. And secondly, I'd like to think that there may well be some form of independent body that oversees that, because when we're talking about large estates, money and stuff like that, you could understand how the government at the moment. Let's use the farmers as an example. There's an argument that there's a land grab going on here, so it would be in the interest of the government sometimes, if you really took this the wrong way, to affect the survival of somebody that was about to leave a lot of money in valuable land and buildings. So then it becomes a really, really difficult issue, because you're talking about a proportion of that money going to the government. So what I'm saying to you is, if it's done with full democracy, full transparency, and the people involved are well trained, but they don't have a relationship with each other on an individual, then I can see that it's good for society to have that option, because more and more people are living longer, and that was the case up until the last 5 years, and that those people should be allowed to die with dignity, because at the moment, I can assure you there's a lot of people that I'm now aware of aren't dying with dignity.
And that was the big concern by Kim Leadbeater, who proposed this. And it's not the first time it's been brought to Parliament. Key supporters for the bill: Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, against the bill, Health Secretary Wes Streeting, and the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood. I mean, Health Secretary, does that not have some sort of substance behind people watching at home? Obviously, we know it's a private member's bill, which means that there was no whip, everyone was free to vote as they wish. Rishi Sunak supported the bill also. Reform split 2 to 3 in favour of the bill. Does it really show the different walks of life? Because a lot of people were going to the likes of Tim writes, it's not a conservative thing to vote for. Was it party political, or was it a personal vote for each individual member of the House?
You'd like to think it was a personal vote for each individual member of the House, although the way you've just described it to me, there'll be lots of people watching this sort of think, well, we know where the split was, and it's not down party lines, is it? There is an organisation that seems to have an undue influence on elite politicians, and that organisation has a quest to reduce the population of the world by 2050. So there will be some people within this vote that have nefarious reasons for voting for it. Having said that, if it's done in a free democracy, which I'd like to think we will presume continue to be, then you would think we should have to be able to have those debates without people infiltrating it in a nefarious way. That's my concern. When you start listing the people that are for it, that sends a shiver down my spine, especially when you look at what's happening. I don't know whether you saw overnight what happened in Australia, where one of the key doctors in Australia broke down crying because he was admitting to the country what had happened to the people of his country as a result of the COVID vaccines. These same people who also know the outcome of the COVID vaccines here in the UK, they know that there's been heart problems. They know that there has been things that have happened to people. I don't know what the percentages are, but it's certainly not safe and effective for everybody. These are the same people that are voting for this. So that does concern me a great deal.
Conservative MP Danny Kruger was one of the most vocal critics of the bill. He called it state suicide service. Are we potentially at risk of going down a slippery slide if this isn't watertight? Now, we'll talk about in a moment the next steps of this bill, because it isn't into law. It's key to point that out. But are we on a slippery slope where we could see a potential widening in a few years' time, 5-10 years' time, where people feel depressed or something like that, and they're terminally depressed or something terminally, and they say, well, I'm going to die in the next 6 months as I'm terminally depressed. Do we fear that that could be a potential possibility? And also, just on that, the life. I mean, there are reports of other people who were told at 46 that they had 6 months to live, and they lived an additional 12 years. Are we risking that also in terms of the advance of medical services at the moment, especially in the UK?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got to be careful how there are things happening around my own private life at the moment.
Of course,
I'm perfectly healthy, and I will tell you, Big Pharma has a huge amount of power in this country and in North America and in China and everywhere. So you have to be very, very careful what you allow your lawmakers to do. I am very concerned about it, but I also recognize that in a proper democratic free society, it makes sense to be having that debate. Yeah. And if it's properly controlled, it should be an asset, not a problem. Having said that, for all the reasons that you've given, am I comfortable that we have a set of lawmakers and politicians that are capable of making that decision? 100% no, not at this moment.
And that's not just on this bill, that's on the wider range of politics at the moment.
Well, they were going to give all authority over another outbreak of a pandemic to the World Health Organization. And that was going to be taken away from us without a vote. They're the same people. So I look at this and I think to myself, are the people that are running our politics for our nation and therefore our economy and our health and our education, are they working for us, themselves, or some other unknown entity? All I can say is if you look at the key policies of both the Conservatives and Labour over the last 2 parliaments, not one of them have implemented any of their own agendas, their own manifestos. The Conservatives put theirs down, and when you look at what Keir Starmer has said in 2023 about how much he would make sure that farmers were supported to the National Farmers Union, and then what he said about our elderly and those that needed to be looked after with support for their heating in the winter. When you look at these key policies, the fact that he U-turned immediately tells me that these people are not working for the people that elected them. And those are facts. They're not even, people can't call me a right-wing conspiracy theorist. That's a fact.
And we can get into the debate of the winter fuel payments with the stats that Labour had as well, that 4,000 pensioners were going to die. It saves pensions. Let's see the moment that Speaker of the House, the video of the Speaker of the House confirming the vote of yesterday. And the silence, for me, it was the silence of everyone in Parliament, which you rarely get when you see, when they read out a vote. So that's going to... We'll show you that video now.
The ayes to the right, 330. The noes to the left, 275.
So we didn't see the end, but it was the pure silence thereafter. It wasn't something that it was to be ecstatic about. Ultimately, I mean, TfL were criticised this week for putting out adverts in support of this. And they showed a picture of a woman happy and jumping around, and it's almost, who is that jumping around? Is that a subliminal message? Is this someone happy that they can now take their life? But they're not going to be jumping around if they're at that position. So the criteria for assisted dying, I want to get this out. A person must be free from coercion. First question on that, how are they ever going to get that 100% right? Like you say, if there is a bigger opportunity at play, person A is passing away, 2 children or 3 children with a lot of land who now want to inherit this land or inherit this wealth, how is there going to be 100% guarantee coercion hasn't taken place?
Curtis, if your mum said to you when you were a child, well, my mum said to me when I was a child, Curtis, you're not looking very well today. And she said it every morning for 7 days. do you think you'd feel well?
Not at all.
No. That's why being coerced into feeling or doing something is very, very easy.
Yeah.
10 million people thought that Keir Starmer would look after our pensioners this winter. So coercion is very, very easy. At the end of the day, I'm trying to say that's a concern. I think you have to look at, aren't they going to look at the actual illness and what the development of that illness is supposed to mean from a medical point of view and then from a legal point of view? You would have thought that would be the first step to look at. I mean,
Yeah.
If we're going to allow people to be euthanized for their mental condition, that is really, really mental condition, meaning what I mean by that is if it's a condition that could be treatable.
Over a long period of time, yeah.
Look, surely not. I mean, what is this? Because it sounds like it has the potential to bring back the death penalty, doesn't it?
It is a legal option for suicide. I see suicide is a crime, but obviously it's a very different punishment with that. There's no kind of direct punishment. It's more help that's given. So just go on there. So 2 independent doctors have to confirm the terminal diagnosis, and this request must be signed off by a High Court judge. And the next step, so there's going to be a committee from all members of the House of all different views, will be put together, and it's going to be examined line by line and then taken back to the House, what they estimate to be in around about 6 months' time, and voted on again as a final bill. Now, so this means the fact it's never got to this stage before. So there is a chance this might not go ahead, but there is even more of a chance that people are more likely now to put this through. The MPs are more likely to put this through. Public support. Sorry.
No, I'm listening to you, and I'm pleased. I'm very pleased about what you're saying. I don't know the detail of this particular issue, and I'm quite interested in what you're saying. And I think it's making more sense because a lot of things can happen in 6 months. We're going to know an awful lot more. Yeah, we're going to know an awful lot. Look, between you and I talking about doing this show, our transport secretaries resigned for lying. Okay, from what I understand, that's the tip of the spear about what we're about to hear. So let's just see who's actually making those decisions in 6 months' time. That'll be interesting.
It's very true. So public support for this, it's estimated around 73% of Britons are in favour for this bill. Now, we do need to point out that it is Wales and
Curtis,
England.
I'm sorry. Opinion polls estimate garbage.
Yeah.
You know,
Of course,
people in this country thought the American election was going to be close. Garbage. So at the end of the day, I don't believe any opinion polls. That is propaganda. Because you and I both know, if you were asked that a question, both of us from the discussion we've had, I think we'd be very much in the middle of not knowing which way to go.
Yeah.
So the idea that 76% do know which way to go, it depends on the question they were asked.
Of course, and in the manner as well of the conversation. I imagine it wouldn't have just been a direct question that they were given. It's got a long way to go, but I mean, we are very close to potentially this happening. And obviously in the situation you explained with your own personal experience, it's one that you would believe that would be this being good for. But in other situations, for every one of your situation, there could be 10 of the opposite where people are being coerced into this decision.
Well, I am prepared to, now my mum's passed, I am prepared to tell you, to give you the other side of this, just to show you why it probably would have been a good idea in my mum's case. She was in a care home, and the care home gets paid a lot of money from our estate to look after my mum. So as soon as you say that person has moved from somebody that's in care to somebody that's in palliative care, end of life care, as you and I would know it, that the payment ceases to come from the family estate and goes on to the state. And for that reason, the care home in our situation, I'm not going to name them, they potentially get less revenue.
And they're all privately owned. Well, majority are privately owned.
Potentially, and this is allegedly and potentially because we can't. I'm just telling you, but
Yeah.
that's how it was explained to me. And so that means that they could actually keep somebody in a state that is not very nice for that individual in order to maintain an income. So that's a very good reason for there to be a clear, defined line when you know that somebody's moved over that threshold of being a care home resident to an end-of-life care home resident. So that's why I would think, and then the process is, is assisted dying is probably too strong a word, but it's going to happen, so you have to do it so that there's at least pain emitted to the patient through that process, and that's what I subscribe to. But it could be massively abused. That's the problem.
And let's face it, doctors are overworked at the moment. Courts are backlogged. If you get told you've got 6 months to live, what's the chance this is going to go through within 6 months with an actual thorough check? That's the other question.
Well,
if you've got 6 months, obviously I know it's an estimate. You could go longer than that. It could be shorter. But if you're spending that 6 months wanting this to happen, it's not a nice way to
Geoffrey
end your life.
Boycott. Geoffrey Boycott, the great cricketer, was given 7 weeks to live, and he's still alive 4.5 years later. I think it is. This
is the big concern. It's there's so many ifs, there's so many buts. But I suppose with every law that passes through of such magnitude, this is probably one of the biggest in recent times. It's got to be scrutinised. It's got to be watertight when it comes out, and if it does go into law.
Yeah, and I think the other point is that we shouldn't use the pressure on the health service because of immigration, for example, to be a reason to try and skim the cream off the top of the elderly. If you understand what I'm saying, this is a very emotive subject for a lot of people. We're giving away free stuff to people who have no allegiance to the country immediately anyway, and we're not supporting those that have been earning money and paying their way throughout their lives.
Well, Andrew, we're going to leave that one there. You've touched on it on your last point there. Migration in the UK has been revised for the year 2023 up to around just under 1 million in 1 year, but is down 20% in 2024. That's due to policy changes, fewer dependents on student visas and that sort of things. So the figures were reported initially in 2023 as 685,000. They've now been corrected to 866,000. So quite a substantial increase. Conservatives promised less immigration to the country. They really failed on that one, didn't they?
Yeah, massively. And we all know it's continued, really. Everybody knows that it's continued. Just on that, I believe that from 2002 to 2018, the average migration into the United Kingdom was somewhere between 30 and 50,000 people a year. So the figures you're talking about, if somebody's gloating that they've reduced the current number of people from 800,000 down by 20%, they're still for the wind. I mean, it's still so shockingly high. Yep. It's unbelievable. My guess is that the Labour may well succeed a little bit more with their policy here. It might come down another 5% because who wants to come to a country that's going to be an economic basket case?
It's true. It's true. And I point out those stats were net figures. The actual revised migration for June 2023 was from 740,000 to 906,000. And for December 22, it got increased as well from 764,000 to 873.
So what you're saying is we've only had the first salvo anyway. So the second figure is still to come. And if history is anything to go by, they haven't reduced it at all. Look, at the end of the day, can anybody tell us that an increase of between 700,000 and 800,000 a year is sustainable in a country that already has well over 65 million people and look at the size of our country and look at our economic base. Our economic base is not manufacturing.
No.
How can you manufacture when you've got the highest electricity cost in the Western world?
It's really putting strain, and now the people in power don't have the ability to negotiate better deals because they've got nothing to negotiate with at the moment.
Well, the good news is, and I know you wanted us to talk about this, that decision by Andrea Jenkyns to move to reform. Forget who your politics are. I'm talking about Andrea Jenkyns as an MP and what she stands for and her knowledge. Her family is from the Grimsby area. She's passionate about the United Kingdom and very passionate about fishing and farming. And she's going to try and win that mayoralship in Lincolnshire, which is the breadbasket of the UK in terms of food production. At this moment in time, Ed Millie Billionaire Band is trying to cover Lincolnshire with solar panels and make some farmers extremely rich on our taxpayers' money. I can't think of a better person to stop him in his tracks, frankly. Doesn't matter what your political views are. If she gets that job, I hope the first thing she does is shut him down.
Scrap the idea.
Shut him down. All the locals don't want it. I have customers in Lincolnshire. If you talk to them, they don't want it because they know. Why would you want to take fertile land out of food production? What's the reason for that? You just have to say, look at what happened to the ULEZ cameras in London. Well, think of that 100 times over if we end up with solar panels in Lincolnshire when people haven't got enough food in their mouths. I really do think people need to think about what we're really doing here now.
Yeah.
So that was a great appointment. That was a great appointment because it was a great decision by her to recognize that within her own existing party, there's a large number of people in that party that don't believe in patriotism and Britain. They believe in a federal globalist Europe. She had to make a decision, and she's made the right decision for her because absolutely the Conservative Party, you've only got to look at what they did when they were in power.
Yeah.
They didn't implement anything that was conservative.
Well, just one last point, because I do want to get on to the Andrea Jenkyns. A decline in illegal arrivals in the UK, which was a huge thing that Rishi Sunak and prior to that Boris had promised, and the short period of Liz Truss. Illegals, immigrants arriving to the UK detected to the year September 24 decreased by 18%, with small boat arrivals dropping 21% to 29,851. That we know of,
well,
obviously.
Come on. I mean, was the weather good? Look, these sort of statistics, one man's legal is another man's illegal. That's the first thing. Depends on what the criteria is between legal and illegal. But I also have to say, before people shoot me down for being very anti-immigration, I'm the opposite. We need a lot of immigration for farm workers in a skilled area of that. We need it for our health service. We need it for schools, for education, etc. And people from all over the world should be welcome to the United Kingdom legally in jobs that are required.
Society needs immigration to develop. There's no denying that.
Culturally, I am so proud that I've grown up, and I'm 60 years old now, and I have friends who are from all corners of the world: Pakistanis, Indians, Japanese, Afro-Caribbean. They have enriched this country beyond all recognition, and I hope they continue to arrive here in their droves. But they need to arrive here with ambition for them, their families, and their families. And that is the crux of this. The idea that you should point the finger at somebody that he said Little Britain doesn't want immigration. Well, I don't want young men without families to arrive here, be given a phone, a place to live, heating, and told they can't get a job.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
when they've just travelled through several countries which are also safe to stay in also?
That's another thing. Absolutely right. Yeah. And I would say this, and I would argue this till the cows come home, because I can talk like that. Every single person that arrives on a dinghy from France should be taken back in a dinghy to France.
I agree. And I do agree with that.
Now, whether they then can apply and enter our country legally, that's another question. And if these people are really fleeing political persecution, and I understand that, as you, I'm sure, know, that quite a lot of them are coming from Albania. There are 11 flights a week that are very cheap coming into the UK from Albania. So why don't they get on them if they're fleeing political persecution?
All the questions which I'm sure aren't being answered or aren't even being asked to them. Or in that area. I do want to come on now just quickly before we wrap up. The Dame, Andrea Jenkyns, she joined Reform, supposedly their 100,000th member, NigelFarage said, in a planned announcement on the same day as the net migration stat. So it worked out well for Reform that day. Just before we get on to having a quick chat about that, this was the part of the speech that she gave at the conference that the Reform had called about why she joined Reform.
I have to admit, I feel a bit shaky in the back of the stage. Today, I've joined the party of the brave. Our once great country is at a crisis point. Labour's record speaks volumes already, you must agree. They have compromised our British territories, fleeced our farmers, and they're punishing our pensioners. Their policies are anti-business, anti-aspiration, and detrimental to all that we hold dear as a country. In the past 5 months, as we've seen, our British people have been locked up for expressing their opinions, while real criminals are being released early onto our streets. This is not the Britain that we deserve. But in times of crisis, we need strong leadership. We need those patriotic, brave hearts to be a true voice for the people, and Reform is that voice. We need a party that champions truth, that stands up for the underdog, and that listens to the people. And this is why I have joined Reform. Under Nigel's bold leadership, Richard's dynamism, and the sharp intellect of Zia, Reform UK is surging and membership is soaring. We'll be ready to challenge the tired two-party system, and we will deliver the fresh start this country so desperately needs.
So, I mean, there's strong belief that she has that Reform could challenge the two major party system. She was a Conservative at the last elections. She said she believed in going down with the sinking ship, so providing loyalty. She didn't win her seat and is now going for the to become mayoress of Lincolnshire.
Well, absolutely. She's done everything right. Even, you know, at the end of the day, that loyalty, I questioned that at the time, but in hindsight, maybe there's a case for that loyalty that she's shown. She wanted to let them see how they destroyed themselves and made the decision at the end of the day, once she'd lost her seat. So you can't say that she's done what other people may have done, which is jump the ship to stay in a job.
Yes.
And so, but whether they can challenge nationally, that is the big question. Well, they've got a very, very good blueprint to follow. And
they're starting to win parish councils. I think they're making their way now onto county councils. So I think they've got a good 5 or 4 and a bit years to establish themselves further. And just before we came on, I said to you that I believe that for them to do this, they need to make appointments like these kind of every quarter of the year, if you like, to make sure the public still know that we are meaning business and we are getting names like Andrea Jenkyns on board.
Yeah, if you're absolutely right. personally, I don't think it's going to take 5 years, though. I think we're in for a revolution that we've seen across the pond. You know, people forget the three major politicians in America right now have one thing in common. That's Donald Trump, I'm going to say Elon Musk, and RFK. Do you know what that is, Curtis?
What's that?
They were all Democrats.
Yeah. Trump's history was
Okay.
Democrat voting.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, freedom, democracy, and the truth are intrinsically linked. And we all know that the two major parties at this moment in time have broken that link.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've all, and I'd even go as far as to say the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru and the Liberal Democrats, they've also broken that code. And so very, very quickly, the general public have them in one box and at the moment reform in another. I know there's some a bit of a muddy water in between where there are what people describe as extreme right-wing alternatives. I hope, because an awful lot of those people really are just passionate about their country and come across that way. We should be an inclusive country. We should value every citizen, and we should make sure that everybody, if as much as possible, has an equal chance in life to succeed. And so a very good education and health system are absolutely imperative. Frankly, Labour and the Conservatives can't deliver that. They can't. The globalist view of open borders, unlimited printing of money, and high taxation is an impossible meal. It can't be fed. You know, it is. And that, and I think the first
It's not sustainable.
thing that it's not sustainable. Exactly. That's a very good point. I mean, look at the reason that the previous administration in America failed was COVID. They used COVID to oust a serving elected official. I mean, most people who really understand what's going on here know that that was the case. And I would say it's a miracle where we are right now. And let's hope that we can foster peace through this next 3 or 4 months to the other side of the danger that we're all in today. Because people like Andrea Jenkyns, she's been a bastion of the truth. There's not many. You can name them on one hand. And she's one of them, you know, and I think that more than ever, that was a huge message to the people of the United Kingdom, because I don't know many people who don't like Andrea Jenkyns, even those that voted for to remain in the European Union. She hasn't shouted that patriotism the way that I have, for example. And I think she's a huge, huge benefit to the cause for our future freedom, to be honest.
Well, Andrew, that is all, unfortunately, we have time for today. I'm sure we could keep on talking. Just before I do thank you and let you go, will you be buying Ed Davies' Christmas single this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, his record will be as successful as him. That's what I'm going to say. You know, yeah, fair play. You get what you get what you see with him.
You do. He doesn't hide behind any mirrors or anything like that. He's just
a very good
Sir Ed
point.
Davey.
I don't think I think if Carlsberg did pathetic politicians, he would raise the bar every time. But there you go.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been great, and it's been amazing to have your insight, especially when we're talking about the Ireland discussion earlier on today. It's your view on the assisted dying bill. A lot of people share with you also. So it's been an honour to have you on the programme. So thank you so much for coming on.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, we've discussed a week in politics, would you believe? Join me next weekend while we're discussing yet another week, and I'm sure there'll be even more to talk about. This has been In Focus with me, CurtisHinton, on CurtisNews.